Sandra had done everything right. 32 years at the same company in Phoenix, Arizona. She maxed out her 401k every single year for the last decade. She paid off her house. She drove the same car for 11 years because she refused to carry a note on something that depreciated. She clipped coupons when she did not need to. She said no to vacations her kids begged for. She said no to the kitchen renovation her husband had been asking about since 2009. She told herself, later, we will do it later, right now we save. And she did. Sandra retired at 63 with $740,000 in her retirement account. By every measure she had seen on the internet, in the magazines, in the financial advice segments on the morning news, she had won. She had crossed the finish line that most Americans never even get close to. 3 years later, Sandra was back at work. Not because she wanted to be, not because she missed the office or the routine or the colleagues. She was back because the money was disappearing faster than anyone had told her it would. And the single decision she made the month before she retired, the one that felt the most responsible, the most logical, the most safe, was the decision that started unraveling everything she had spent 3 decades building. I know you are either saving for retirement right now, or you are watching someone you love try to figure it out, or you are already in it and something feels slightly off but you cannot quite name what it is. By the time this video is over, you are going to understand the mistake that wipes out retirement accounts that took lifetimes to build. And you are going to understand why it keeps happening to the exact people who tried the hardest to do everything right. If this channel is new to you, hit subscribe right now. We talk about money the way it actually works, not the way the brochures say it does. Hit subscribe, hit that bell, and let us get into it. Here is the thing that nobody in the financial services industry has any incentive to tell you clearly. The skills that made you good at saving money are not the same skills that make retirement money last. Saving requires discipline, sacrifice, and consistency. Making money last in retirement requires something completely different. It requires strategy, timing, and an understanding of how withdrawals, taxes, inflation, and market cycles interact with each other simultaneously. And most people walk into retirement with 30 years of saving skills and almost 0 withdrawal skills. Nobody taught you the second half of the game because the second half is harder to sell. Let me introduce you to David. He is 61 years old, lives outside of Columbus, Ohio, works in manufacturing, and has been contributing to his 401k since he was 27. David is careful. David reads the quarterly statements. David has a spreadsheet. When his company offered a target date fund, David picked the most conservative one because he was getting close to retirement and he had heard you were supposed to get more conservative as you aged. He felt responsible doing it. He felt like the adult in the room. What David did not know is that by moving everything into that conservative fund 5 years before retirement, he locked himself into a growth rate that would not keep pace with inflation over a 30-year retirement. He was so focused on not losing money in the short term that he did not protect himself against losing purchasing power in the long term. David retired at 62 feeling prepared. By 74, his monthly withdrawals were buying him noticeably less than they did on day one, and the gap kept widening every single year. This is the inflation trap, and it catches careful people because it feels like the responsible choice in the moment. Here is what you need to understand about retirement math. Most people think the goal is to not lose money. The actual goal is to not run out of money, and those are two completely different objectives. You can protect every single dollar you saved and still run out of money if inflation quietly erodes what those dollars can buy over 2 or 3 decades. A grocery cart that cost you $120 in 2004 costs you over $200 today. That is not a temporary spike. That is the slow, consistent, invisible tax on every retiree who did not account for it. Now here is the part that truly hurts. Most Americans retire with the majority of their savings sitting in tax-deferred accounts. Your 401k, your traditional IRA, your 403b. These are accounts where you put in pre-tax dollars and let them grow for decades. The deal was simple. You do not pay taxes now, you pay them later. That felt great during your working years because you lowered your taxable income every single year and let the money compound. But here is what later actually looks like. When you turn 73, the IRS requires you to start pulling money out of those accounts whether you need it or not. They are called required minimum distributions, and they do not care about your budget. They do not care about your medical bills. They do not care that the market just dropped 18%. They require you to take a specific percentage of your account every single year. And every dollar you pull out gets added to your taxable income for that year. Meet Carol. She is a retired teacher from outside Nashville, Tennessee. She and her husband had done well. Between their 2 accounts, they had saved just over $900,000. They had Social Security coming in, a small pension from her husband's years in local government, and they felt genuinely secure. Then their required minimum distributions kicked in. The combination of Social Security, the pension, and the mandated withdrawals pushed their household income into a bracket that started taxing up to 85% of their Social Security benefits. Their Medicare premiums jumped because of something called ARM-AAA, which is a surcharge that kicks in when your income crosses certain thresholds. Their tax bill doubled from what it had been the year before retirement. Carol told her daughter, "We saved all this money and now the government is taking a bigger piece than we ever expected." She was not wrong. She just did not know the rules of the game she was playing until she was already in the middle of it. The mistake was not saving in a 401k. The mistake was saving everything in a 401k and never building a tax diversification strategy on the other side of retirement. Because where your money lives matters just as much as how much of it you have. Let us talk about sequence of returns, because this one is invisible until it is too late. Imagine two people, both retire with $500,000. Both average a 7% return over 20 years. On paper, they look identical, but person A experiences bad market years at the beginning of retirement, and person B experiences them at the end. Person A, who got the bad years first, runs out of money. Person B is fine, same average return, same starting balance, completely different outcomes. This is called sequence of returns risk, and it is one of the most dangerous things that can happen to a retirement account, and almost no one talks about it until someone has already lived through it. Here is why it works this way. When you are in your working years and the market drops, you actually benefit in a quiet way because you are still buying shares at lower prices with every contribution. Your account recovers and then some. But when you are retired and withdrawing money, a market drop early in retirement forces you to sell shares at low prices to cover your living expenses. You are now locking in those losses. You are pulling out depleted dollars. And the shares you sold at the bottom are not there to recover when the market comes back. The math permanently shifts against you. And the more you have to withdraw to cover expenses, the faster the damage compounds. Robert retired in late 2007 outside of Detroit, Michigan. He had $620,000, a solid plan, and a reasonable withdrawal rate. Then 2008 happened. The market dropped nearly 40%. Robert had to keep withdrawing to pay his mortgage, his utilities, and his prescriptions. He sold shares all the way down. When the market recovered between 2009 and 2012, Robert did not fully recover with it because those shares were gone. By 2016, his account was in a position his planner had told him should not have been possible. Nobody told Robert that the timing of bad years is not random risk. It is the central risk of the withdrawal phase, and protecting against it requires a completely different strategy than the one that built his account in the first place. Here's the mistake underneath all of the other mistakes. Most people plan for retirement like it is a finish line. They spend decades building toward a number, a date, a moment. And when they hit that moment, they exhale, they stop, they assume that the hard part is over. But retirement is not a finish line. It is a starting line for a completely different financial challenge that can last 20, 25, or 30 years depending on your health and your family history. And you need a running strategy, not just an arrival strategy. The financial industry has done a remarkable job of teaching Americans how to accumulate wealth. Contribute early, contribute consistently, diversify. Take advantage of the employer match. Stay in the market through the downturns. That advice is genuinely good, and it works. But the industry has done a far less thorough job of teaching people how to distribute that wealth efficiently once the paychecks stop coming. Because distribution advice is complicated, it is not standardized, and it requires looking at your specific tax situation, your health, your other income sources, and your actual spending, not the spending you project in a worksheet. So here's what actually works, and I want you to write this down. First, build what planners call a bucket strategy before you retire, not after. The idea is simple. You divide your money into 3 categories based on when you will need it. The short-term bucket covers your first 2 to 3 years of expenses, and it lives in cash or very stable, low-risk instruments. This is your buffer. When the market drops in year 1 of your retirement, you pull from this bucket, not from your investments. You give your investments time to recover. The middle bucket covers years 3 through 10, and it holds moderate growth assets. The long-term bucket is your inflation fighter. It stays in growth assets, real equities. For the decade or more, you will not need to touch it. This structure does not eliminate risk. It sequences it in your favor instead of against you. Second, take taxes seriously before you turn 73. The years between retirement and when your required minimum distributions kick in are some of the most valuable tax planning years of your life, and most people waste them. If you retire at 62 and your RMDs do not start until 73, you have up to 11 years where your income may be lower than it has been in decades. This is the window to do Roth conversions. You take money from your traditional IRA or 401k. You pay taxes on it now at potentially lower rates, and you move it into a Roth account where it grows tax-free and is never subject to required minimum distributions. Done strategically over several years, this can dramatically reduce your tax burden for the rest of your retirement. Third, delay Social Security if you can. I know that sounds like the opposite of what your instincts are telling you. You have been paying into it for 40 years and you want to claim it. But Social Security grows by approximately 8% for every year you delay between 62 and 70. That is a guaranteed, inflation-adjusted, government-backed 8% annual increase. You will not find that in any investment product on the market. For every year you delay, you are buying yourself a permanently higher monthly income for the rest of your life. And if your health and your savings allow for it, the math on waiting is almost always compelling. Fourth, know your actual spending number before you retire. Not the number you think sounds right. Not the number from the retirement calculator that asked you 4 questions. Your real number. Track what you spend for 12 straight months. Include the irregular expenses, the car repairs, the dental work, the annual insurance premiums, the holiday travel. Most people underestimate their real spending by 20 to 30%, and that gap is the difference between a plan that works and a plan that runs thin a decade in. Fifth, account for healthcare as its own separate budget line. This is the one that surprises people the most and damages plans the fastest. If you retire before 65 and you are off an employer plan, private health insurance can run anywhere from $800 to $1,500 a month, depending on your state and your coverage level. Even after Medicare kicks in at 65, out-of-pocket costs, premiums, supplemental coverage, vision, dental, and long-term care can easily run $5,000 to $10,000 per year per person. Most retirement projections treat healthcare as a rounding error. It is not a rounding error. It is one of the largest and most unpredictable line items in your entire retirement budget. Sandra figured some of this out eventually. After going back to work, she sat down with a fee-only financial planner, the kind who charges a flat rate and has no incentive to sell you products. In 6 months, they restructured her withdrawal strategy, started a Roth conversion plan, and repositioned her portfolio in a way that matched her actual timeline instead of her anxiety. She did not get back the 3 years she spent drawing down the wrong accounts in the wrong order, but she built a plan that gave her a realistic path to never having to do that again. The tragedy was never that Sandra did not save enough. She saved more than most Americans will ever save. The tragedy was that she walked into the most financially complex chapter of her life with the tools she built for the chapter before it. Nobody handed her a new map. Nobody told her the rules changed at the starting line. I think about every Sandra, every David, every Carol sitting in their first year of retirement, pulling up their account balance and feeling like everything is fine. Not knowing about sequence risk, not knowing about the tax time bomb sitting in their traditional IRA, not knowing that the conservative fund they chose out of caution is quietly losing the fight against inflation, not knowing that the 4% rule they read about in one article was built on assumptions that may not match their life at all. They did everything they were told, and what they were told was not the whole story. That is not going to be you. Not after today. The mistake was never that they did not try hard enough or save long enough. The mistake was that the accumulation phase and the distribution phase require completely different thinking, and almost no one tells you that until something has already gone wrong. If this video made you think of someone, your parents, your in-laws, your older sibling who just put in their retirement papers, a friend who is planning to retire in the next 2 or 3 years, send this to them right now, not later. Right now while it is in front of you. Because this is the conversation that most people only have after the damage has already started. And before you go, drop a comment and tell me, what is the one thing about retirement you wish someone had explained to you sooner? I read every single comment. If this channel is new to you, subscribe and turn on notifications. I am Karen. I will see you in the next one.